Mystery woman was killed over 40 years ago. Police now know her identity and are hunting her killer. A 23-year-old woman who was killed has now been identified and her killer is still out there. 40 years after her remains were discovered in Nashville, the mystery woman has been identified as Michelle Inman. She was identified through genetic genealogy. Her skeletal remains were discovered by a driver who was having trouble with their car. They pulled over back in March 1985 and discovered her body. It was determined that she was killed around 2 to 5 months before her body was found. Investigators were actually able to find her brother through the new information, but he said that he hadn't been in contact with her for over 40 years. This is quite obvious because it's been over 40 years since she died. We still have no idea who is responsible for her death.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so this humanoid creature was caught on camera chasing a car at very high speeds. This thing or human is completely naked and is running at insanely high speeds. This video was captured by a group of friends who were just hanging out driving around when suddenly they started getting chased by this thing in their car. Just put yourself in this situation and imagine how scary it would be. Luckily nobody was hurt and they got away, so here's the video. So yeah, let me know if you think this is just a random human completely tweaking, or some sort of humanoid creature with insanely fast speeds. Either way, this video is absolutely terrifying nonetheless, and I really hope this never happens to me or any of you.
I found a baby in my mother's freezer after she passed away. My name is Adam Smith, and I was 37 years old when I made this horrifying discovery that will haunt me for life. While I was cleaning and sorting through the belongings of my recently deceased mother, who succumbed to cancer, I felt a deep sadness, but I knew it was something I had to do. Since I was a child, my mother would place a box in our freezer, and I was forbidden to touch it. She explained to me that it contained a slice of wedding cake that she wanted to keep. When I was younger, I never questioned this, but with each move, she would always place that box back in the freezer without further explanation. As I was preparing to empty the contents of her fridge, there was that box she had forbidden me to touch. Since I had to sort through her things, I opened it, only to discover a baby carefully placed inside. It instantly struck me that she had mentioned something when I was younger. She had whispered to me, "You had a little sister who died when you were 8. I believe this could be my deceased sister, but what could have possibly happened?
This is how a ham sandwich and a can of beer helped to catch criminals. Operation Venetic was a police investigation into the use of encrypted phones. Criminals have historically used the EncroChat network as they felt safe and secure to chat openly about criminal activity. However, the EncroChat servers were actually taken down in 2020 following an investigation by the National Crime Agency. Criminals Richard Wiley and Richard Whiteside were using encrypted phones to discuss their criminal activity. Staggeringly, a photo of a ham sandwich and a can of Stella helped to catch the pair. The photos were matched to Richard Whiteside's address in Blackpool after police examined the surroundings in the photos. There were distinctive items in the pictures that matched the property. Police were then able to identify that the men were actually the users of the EncroChat code names Snail and Peppershirt. Richard Wiley was jailed for 6 years for conspiracy to supply substances, transfer and conceal criminal property, and substance supplying. Richard Whiteside was jailed for 4 years.
This is the scariest story about the baby's first words. There was a woman named Mary who had a 19-month-old baby girl. She loved her baby so much and couldn't wait for her to say her first words. One night when Mary was cooking dinner, her husband called her out into the living room. He said their daughter was trying to say something. After Mary and her husband watched their baby mumble for a bit, the baby then said, "Mommy dies." Mary and her husband both looked at each other in confusion. Mary thought she misheard her baby, but by the look at her husband's face, they heard the same thing. The couple then laughed it off and went on with their night. The next morning, Mary was on her way to work when she suddenly got into a fatal car accident. She was then immediately rushed to the hospital where her daughter and husband were waiting for her. When Mary's daughter and husband went into the room she was in, Mary's daughter pointed at her and said, "Mommy dies." And minutes later, Mary died from her injuries. Nobody knows how the baby knew her mom was going to die. This led to Mary's husband resenting the baby because he believed his baby had some cause in his wife's death. He then put the baby up for adoption not even a year later. To this day, nobody knows where the girl is, and many people wonder if she's still predicting people's deaths.
I had thought that I had seen everything when it came to cults, but you are not prepared for what this cult believes. So HBO just released this documentary about the Love Is One cult, which was run by this woman, Amy Carlson, who calls herself Mother God. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but she believed she was controlled by the spirit of Robin Williams, and this yassified version of Saint Germain. Also, I cover a lot of dark stuff on this page, so you should follow along. She also said she could channel and get advice from this galactic federation of dead celebrities. There's Mr. Rogers, Carrie Fisher, Steve Irwin, and randomly Donald Trump, who is not dead. But Robin Williams is at the top, and so the cult believes they're getting a lot of advice through Robin Williams, so they'll say things like, so one of the beliefs that this cult has is that one day Robin Williams is going to arrive in a spaceship to take Mother God away so that she can spiritually ascend. He also told her that she can only be 103 pounds to get on the spaceship, which is why she's trying to lose a lot of weight. Eventually, Mother God starts getting sicker and sicker, and also bluer and bluer because of the colloidal silver supplements they won't stop giving her, and everyone thinks, oh my god, Robin Williams must be coming on a spaceship really soon to help Mother ascend. Eventually, she passes away, and guess what? Shockingly, Robin Williams does not descend in an intergalactic spaceship to come collect the 103-pound body of Mother God. And so the cult members just have her body. They don't know what to do with it. They thought Robin Williams was gonna come. So they hang out with it for 12 days until the police finally show up. Anyways, this whole thing is a trip. You just gotta watch it to believe it.
Child Protection Services investigated this little girl's family over 6 times. Because they couldn't prove she was being abused, she was then murdered. On the 2nd of October 2023, authorities raced to a petrol station in Topeka at 6:30. They'd been alerted to a reportedly injured little girl. The girl in question was 5-year-old Zoe Felix. Tragically, the little girl was pronounced dead at the scene. The scene was nearby to a homeless camp, and neighbours reported that Zoe and her family had been camping in the area. It transpired that Child Protection had actually received countless reports regarding Zoe's welfare. 6 of those had been assigned for further investigation. The documents dated back to September 2022, and they stated poor conditions in the home and possible substance use in presence of a child. There was reports of dog feces all over the house and the little girl's basic needs not being taken care of. Shockingly, Zoe's mum had been arrested for driving while under the influence, with Zoe in the front seat of the car. Zoe had been placed in police protective custody but given back to her dad just the same evening. Child Protection investigated Zoe's family just a month before she was murdered, and they deemed the living conditions were fine. On the tragic day in question, Zoe was reportedly AR'd and killed. Michael Cherry has been arrested on suspicion of this. He's a 25-year-old homeless male and is believed to have been known to Zoe's family.
I hid and transported drugs in the coffins of American soldiers killed in combat during the Vietnam War. I am Frank Lucas, born on September 9th, 1930, in North Carolina. I grew up in a poor family, and after witnessing my cousin's murder by the Ku Klux Klan, I left for Harlem, New York. There, I became involved in organized crime, initially working for Bumpy Johnson, a respected local mobster. After Bumpy's death, I took control of the organization and became a notorious drug baron. I innovated by importing pure heroin directly from the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia, using coffins of soldiers who died in combat during the Vietnam War. My heroin, nicknamed Blue Magic, was of higher quality and cheaper than that of my competitors, allowing me to become very rich and powerful. However, my wealth and ostentatious lifestyle attracted the attention of authorities, and Special Agent Richard Bumpkin was one of the key players in the drug bust. Richard Roberts eventually arrested me in 1975. After a high-profile trial, I was sentenced to 70 years in prison in 1976. However, I agreed to cooperate with authorities and testify against numerous corrupt police officers, leading to a reduction in my sentence. Eventually, I was released in 1991. After my release, I attempted to lead an honest life by becoming an entrepreneur and working with my family. My story was brought to the screen in the film American Gangster, released in 2007, with Denzel Washington portraying me. I lived the rest of my life away from crime until my death on May 30th, 2019.
This is Two Girls, One Cup, one of the most disgusting shock videos on the internet explained. I'm explaining this off memory and other people's comments. There is no way I watch this video again because it's that gross. The video is 1 minute long, and as it starts, you hear a piano track over the video and you see two girls making out. But at around 10 seconds in, it gets absolutely sickening. One of the girls gets a glass cup and defecates in it, filling it all the way to the top. A jump cut then occurs and it shows the two women licking the feces in the cup like it's ice cream. It cuts again and it shows one of the girls rubbing the feces around her mouth, and the video then cuts again, and it shows the two girls making out with feces in their mouth and all over their faces. The next scene, one of the girls sticks her fingers down her throat trying to make herself vomit into the glass as the other girl licks it. The next scene, it shows one of the girls standing up and the other one is on her knees. The one standing up then pukes directly onto the face of the girl on her knees. The final scene shows both girls completely covered in feces as it's even overflowing their mouths. And this is where the video finally concludes. This video is absolutely sickening, and when I tell you not to watch it, don't watch it. I know I say that for all the videos I cover, but this one isn't brutal or gory. It's just plain out disgusting and you really just don't want to see it. You can watch reactions on YouTube of people watching this for the first time. Joe Rogan even has his reaction video up from years ago.
I killed my mother after discovering the secret she had hidden from me all my life, and I am getting out of prison this month. My name is Gypsy Rose Blanchard, and I am a young American woman. Since I was 3 months old, my mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, has made me believe, and everyone else, including doctors, that I am sick. She started by inventing respiratory problems, and when the doctor concluded it was sleep apnea, she wasn't convinced. She consulted other doctors and told them I had different symptoms, but the worst part of it all is that I didn't have any. However, I was too young to understand. I underwent treatments and surgeries I never needed, which caused me to lose all my teeth. As I was always in a wheelchair, my legs were not strong enough to walk. She also shaved my head to make it look like I had cancer. My case moved people and the media who thought I was sick, and I began receiving financial aid from various institutions. My mother started falsifying my records and changed my age. However, as I grew older, I realized that the test results were different from what my mother told me. Everything went on like this until I met Nicholas on an online platform in 2015. I told him about my situation and we concluded that I had to get rid of my mother. Finally, after months of preparation, one evening, I let Nicholas into my house and I locked myself in the bathroom. While Nicholas stabbed my mother to death, we then fled the scene. And a few days later, I made a Facebook post confessing my murder, which alarmed my relatives, and they alerted the police. When they discovered my mother's body and I was missing, they thought I had been kidnapped. But when they found me, my mother's secret was revealed. I could walk perfectly, and I was happy. I confessed everything, and my true story was revealed. Nicholas was sentenced to life in prison, and I received a 10-year sentence. On December 28th, 2023, I will be free. I do not regret what I did. I can finally live a normal life.
This is the most haunted hotel in Texas, the Hotel Galvez in Galveston. On June 10th, 1911, at 6 o'clock p.m., the Hotel Galvez first opened its doors, only a few years after a massive hurricane destroyed Galveston. The hotel is named after Bernardo de Galvez, who discovered Galveston, and his ghost has been seen walking through these cursed halls. For years, the Galvez Hotel was one of the most recognizable hotels in the state of Texas. And in the year 1937, President Franklin D. Roosevelt actually made the Galvez his official summer White House. But if you want to see a ghost, you have to head to the 5th floor. It's in room 501 where the most famous specter of the hotel resides, Audra, the ghost bride. As the story goes, Audra's fiancé left Galveston on a sailing trip, and after he returned they were set to be married. She would wait in room 501, pacing through the halls and climbing to the turrets of the hotel, waiting for her fiancé to return. But one day, after learning that her husband's ship had capsized, she climbed up to one of the turrets in the hotel and took her own life. Tragically, only a few days after she took her own life, her husband returned to shore. Her spirit has been seen wandering the hallways and has made her presence known. Then you have the music hall. This part of the hotel was reportedly built on the mass grave of orphans and nuns. Children and ghost nuns have made their presence clear in this room. If you remember some of the history from the Galveston hurricane, almost the entirety of Galveston was wiped out and thousands died, including nuns and children from a local orphanage. Their spirits have been seen wandering the halls of this famous haunted hotel. But apart from the paranormal history, the regular history of this place is crazy. So many presidents have stayed here, a lot of different old-time celebrities, and a lot of this stems from when Galveston was known as Vegas of the South. And the interior of this hotel is beautiful. It's almost like you're stepping back into the 1920s. But when you go back in time, you're almost always guaranteed to find a ghost. One of the most famous specters is a violent ghost who haunts the men's restroom across the hall from the music hall. I actually investigated that room a few years ago, and what happened in there was terrifying to me. There's also been a young girl seen bouncing a red ball wandering throughout the hallways, and when employees have approached her, she simply vanishes. There's also a historic photo hanging in the hotel that was taken in 1911 that claims to have captured a spectral figure in it. So let me know, would you stay in this haunted hotel? I did, and for more ghostly content, check out my YouTube channel.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.
This case is horrific and really interesting all at the same time when you do some digging. So there's a big conspiracy theory around this case, and I'll explain more about that at the end. This is Antron Singleton, aka Big Lurch, and he is a rapper turned murderer and cannibal. Antron gained his nickname Big Lurch due to his height. He was 6'5" tall. He had quite a successful rap career, and he'd often rap about serial killers such as Jeffrey Dahmer. His rap career was actually taking off, but in the year 2000 he got into a car wreck and he broke his neck. He was discharged and sent home with painkillers, but they weren't enough, and he quickly turned to street drug PCP to relieve his pain. He would take this drug regularly and for weeks on end, and it would cause something called excited delirium, and Antron started having hallucinations. Antron lived with his friend and his friend's girlfriend, Tanisha Ysays, in Los Angeles, California. On the night of April 10th, 2002, Tanisha was found dead in her apartment by a friend. Her chest had been ripped open and she had a 3-inch blade wedged in her shoulder blade. She had teeth marks on her face and her lungs had been ripped out. Antron was actually found standing out in the street covered in blood and looking up to the sky, barking like a dog. Allegedly, he was also holding one of Tanisha's lungs in his hands. The lung apparently also had bite marks in it, and human flesh was found in Antron's digestive tract. He was, of course, arrested. Now, there is a conspiracy theory. I've looked into it, and a lot of people don't believe that Antron murdered Tanisha. They think that he was framed. The police claimed that when they picked Antron up, he was absolutely covered in blood, but his booking photos prove otherwise. People are also doubting how they managed to retrieve human flesh from his digestive tract without performing surgery. And apparently the bite marks on Tanisha's face weren't that of a human, they were dog bites. Antron claims that Tanisha's boyfriend got them both high on PCP and he was the one that committed the murder while they were both passed out. Even Tanisha's own mother doesn't believe that it was Antron. She said that Tanisha's boyfriend was abusive and the day before she died, she'd packed her bags and threatened to leave. She believes that Antron was set up, but she wasn't allowed to testify in court. And in November 2003, he was found guilty of Tanisha's murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. He's currently incarcerated at Salinas Valley State Prison in Monterey County. This is 30-year-old Nestor Hernandez, and he's currently facing the death penalty for double murder. I'm about to play some footage of the day that double murder took place, and the sound is absolutely horrific. It's his girlfriend basically begging the police not to shoot him after he's just murdered 2 people. What makes it even more shocking is that it's in the labour and delivery suite at the hospital where she gave birth, and their newborn son is also in the same room.
Over here, please, come out. Come outside. Okay, I'm Robert. What's your name, partner? What's your name? Talk to me. I'm asking. Let them outside, please. Please. Let them out of the room.
This wasn't Nestor's first encounter with the law. In May 2011, he was actually sentenced to 150 days in jail for stealing a car. In December that same year, he robbed a man at gunpoint outside a convenience store and was found in possession of a gun and heroin. For those charges, he entered a plea deal in which he received 2 years in exchange for a guilty plea. In 2014, after his prison sentence, he began dating Selena, and they were a dangerous match made in heaven. They were both involved in substance abuse and on a clear path to destruction. In 2015, they both attacked a woman in North Dallas while she was unlocking her front door. They hit her, knocked her to the ground, and then tied her up in the bathroom before fleeing with her car and $3,000. They were arrested the same day and given 8 years and 5 years in jail for aggravated assault. Nesta only served 6 of those 8 years, and he was released on parole with an ankle monitor. He was supposed to report his movements to his parole officer, but he actually ended up cutting off his ankle monitor and going into hiding. It took a few months, but in April 2021, the police found Nesta and he was sentenced to just 4 months in jail. He was then released in October, again with an ankle monitor. Selena soon became pregnant with Nesta's baby, and it seems absolutely insane to me that he was released with just an ankle monitor, despite his criminal, violent past, with little support, rehabilitation, or monitoring. On October 21st, 2022, Selena gave birth at the Methodist Dallas Medical Center in Texas, and the day after, just after 10 a.m., Nesta came to visit. He'd been drinking most of the morning, and as you can see from this footage, he actually walked into the hospital holding a beer. And it's insane to me that he wasn't stopped at this point and searched, considering the fact that he was also on parole with an ankle monitor. Nesta had actually managed to convince himself that Selena was cheating on him, and he came to the hospital looking for this non-existent man. When he couldn't find him, he went to Selena's room. He was armed with a gun, and despite their newborn son being in the same room, he took out his gun and began to hit Selena over the head with it repeatedly. Healthcare workers Katie and Jeanette heard the commotion and came to see what was going on. When they entered the room, Nesta shot them both, killing them. Nesta then reloaded his gun, and it's assumed that he was going to come out into the hallway and continue shooting. But when he came out, police shot him in the leg and he retreated back into the room. That's when the standoff with police began, and Nesta eventually did give up the gun and he was able to be detained. CPS have taken Selena and Nesta's baby into care. She is allowed to see him every day, but she is not allowed custody. And Nesta has been charged with capital murder. It carries a minimum sentence of life in prison and a maximum sentence of the death penalty. James Bulger is a name that most of us know. His murder sent shockwaves through the whole country 30 years ago, and it still remains to this day one of the most horrific child murders in the UK. One of the most shocking things about this murder is that it was committed by 2 boys who were just 10 years old. On the 12th of February 1993, an innocent shopping trip turned into every parent's worst nightmare for James's mum, Denise. They were at the Strand Shopping Centre in Merseyside, and while Denise's back was turned for less than 60 seconds, James was lured away by 2 young boys. When Denise turned around and realised that James wasn't behind her anymore, her blood ran cold. She searched frantically for James, but he was gone. Tragically, his mutilated body was found 2 days later by a group of children on some railway tracks. John Venables and Robert Thompson had gone out that day fully intending on abducting a child. They'd actually intended on taking this child outside and pushing them into oncoming traffic. What they actually ended up doing to James was far worse. Just a quick trigger warning here, the details of James's death are really hard to listen to. Some of it is actually too graphic to talk about on here. John and Robert led James to the Leeds and Liverpool Canal, where they dropped him on his head, injuring his face. A witness had actually seen the boys with James and said that James had been crying his eyes out. A further 38 people saw them that day leading James through Liverpool, but nobody intervened. Eventually, James was led up a steep bank onto some railway tracks. One of the boys threw paint into James's eyes. They kicked him, stamped on him, threw rocks at him, and then they stripped him naked and dropped a 22-pound metal bar onto his head, causing 10 skull fractures. The 2 boys then laid James across the railway tracks and covered his head with rubble. After they left the scene, James's body was cut in half by a train. A forensic pathologist determined that James was already dead when he was struck by the train, and he'd suffered 42 separate injuries, that many that it was impossible to determine which one was the fatal blow. Police quickly obtained CCTV from the shopping centre showing two unidentified boys leading James away. A witness came forward that had seen these images on the news, and the two boys were arrested. The fact that the two suspects were so young came as a shock to absolutely everybody working on the case. The boys had paint on their clothes that matched the paint on James's face. They both had blood on their shoes, and a bruise on James's face matched the sole of Robert's shoe perfectly. It was clear to police that these two boys were the ones that had tortured and murdered James. To show just how young these two were, during police questioning, Robert actually asked the police if James had been taken to hospital to get him alive again. John Venables and Robert Thompson were both charged with murder and appeared in court, where they were remanded in custody awaiting trial. The trial began on November 1st, 1993, and it was conducted as an adult trial, with both boys sat on raised chairs so they could see out of the dock. The boys' police interviews were played in court, and multiple items of evidence were also shown, including bloodied rocks and the bar that was dropped on James's head. The pathologist spent a full 33 minutes in court describing James's injuries, which shows just how many there were. His brain damage was extensive and included a hemorrhage, and there was multiple injuries to his legs. Both boys were found guilty of James's murder, making them the youngest convicted murderers in the 20th century, and the judge recommended a minimum term of just 8 years. A petition was then created to increase the boys' sentences, and it was signed almost 300,000 times, meaning that the boys' sentences were increased to 15 years. However, in the year 2000, the boys' lawyers appealed to the Court of Human Rights, saying that they hadn't been given a fair trial as they were too young to understand an adult court, and it was then reduced back down to 8 years. In June 2001, both boys were released, given new identities, and moved to secret locations. As far as we know, since their release, Robert has lived life out of the public eye. However, John was rearrested multiple times. In 2010, police visited John at his flat, and he was found to be trying to destroy the hard drive on his computer. It was analysed, and it was found to contain child SA material involving children as young as 2. John was returned to prison for 2 years, and he was released in 2013 with another new identity. 4 years later, he was again recalled to prison for the same offence, child SA material on his computer. He was given another 3 years, and he was actually refused parole in 2020. He was again up for parole just last month, and the result of this hearing hasn't been revealed yet. It's due to be revealed at the end of next week. I just hope they do the right thing and keep him in prison, because he's clearly still a danger to children.
Some are calling this the most horrific fraternity hazing ever in the United States. This is how one night at university can destroy your life forever. Danny Santulli was 18 years old and a freshman at the Uni of Missouri. In October 2021, Danny was captured on CCTV being blindfolded and led downstairs in an event named Pledge Dad Reveal Night. Danny was made to drink a litre of straight vodka by himself. At around 10:55, Danny collapsed and some of the frat members were seen carrying him to a sofa. Around midnight, Danny was captured on cameras sliding off the sofa, and shortly after he was found unconscious with blue lips. Shockingly, instead of calling an ambulance for Danny, the frat members piled him into a car, dropping him on the way. They drove him to hospital, but at this point he was already in cardiac arrest. Danny had to be resuscitated and spent the next 6 weeks in intensive care. Prior to this evening, Danny had been left needing stitches and crutches after he'd been forced to climb inside of a bin with broken glass inside. 2 nights before the night in question, Danny broke down in tears on the phone to his sister and told her about how stressed he felt about it all. His family had begged him to quit the pledge, but he didn't want to be ridiculed. This is Danny now. He will need full-time care for the rest of his life. He's now severely brain damaged, is blind, and cannot walk or talk. 2 former students are set to go to trial over this case.